Yeah.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Ways and Means Committee, Friday, February 26th. We just have 5 bills today with a total of, looks like 16 oral witnesses, so it should not be a particularly long afternoon. Just reminding everyone that it's unlimited for members, but keeping it under 5 minutes would be smart. And then 3 minutes, the timer will be on for everyone else. We'll start with Delegate Adams, who is the bill, House Bill 1195.
Thank you, Chair, Vice Chair, committee members, and Majority Leader. I'll make this as fast so you can get through your calendar here quickly. House Bill 1195, income tax credits for preceptors in areas with healthcare workforce shortages, eligibility, and sunset repeal. I'm happy to bring this bill. It is a cross file of my Senator Eckhart's bill. You'll see an amendment that conforms the bill to the Senate that has passed. Why is the bill being introduced? In 2016, the General Assembly established the Preceptor Tax Credit Program, which provides tax credits for licensed physicians or nurse practitioners who serve without compensation in an approved preceptorship program. Although the current program has been successful, some concerns have been raised about the eligibility requirements for preceptors. So what does the bill do? Currently, preceptors must work 3 rotations, each consisting of 160 hours of community-based clinical training in an area identified by the Department of Health as having work shortages. House Bill 1195 will reduce the hours of each rotation to 100 hours of community-based clinical training, as this program is self-funded through a renewal fee. Reducing the hours will allow more preceptors to qualify for the credit. In addition, House Bill 1195 removes the current sunset of June 30th, 2021. And why is it important to pass now? The current pandemic has exacerbated the need to bring qualified healthcare providers to our underserved areas, and House Bill 1195 is an extension of our efforts. I'd ask the committee for a favorable report. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Delegate. Any questions for Delegate Adams? All right, thank you very much, Delegate. I'll call up the group. Everyone signed up to testify as in favor. Start with Susan Jones. Excuse me, I'm looking at the wrong bill. Give me a second. First person is Richard Colgan. Is Mr. Colgan here?
He's muted.
All right. I've never done this before where I didn't unmute myself. It's the first time it's ever happened to me. I'm not a liar. Thank you. I apologize for that. I asked for changes to the prior bill so that more community preceptors can take advantage of the benefits of teaching future healthcare professionals in underserved areas. I've been active in medical student education for 23 years, and I'm acutely aware of the impact which a teacher of health professional students has on his or her students. We're in dire need of more primary care practitioners in the state of Maryland, particularly in the underserved areas of our state. And I can attest to the fact as a professor of family and community medicine at the University of Maryland School of Medicine, Department of Family and Community Medicine, that face time is one of the greatest factors which allows a health professional student to decide to the initial legislation, which I actually requested and worked towards on this matter, was successful in encouraging more physicians to host students. Yet we learned that the requirement of 160 hours per 4-hour work week was not realistic. That was my mistake. The reason being that students were required for their coursework to come back to the mothership, be it Johns Hopkins or University of Maryland School of Medicine, for certain academic offerings like orientations, standardized patients, hospice workshops, et cetera, such that the actual 160 hours got eaten up by other obligations, such that as notified by the Maryland Department of Health and adjudicated by them. But because of this obstacle, the number of preceptors who were approved for the credit was significantly curtailed. And at this point, most all of our School of Medicine preceptors are not applying, realizing that they do not meet the cutoff requirements for hours. We believe that reducing the number of qualifying hours to 100 per 4-week rotation will remedy this problem. With passage of this bill, we also believe that we'll see a greater number of preceptors willing to take our students into their office. And this is important as we're competing with offshore medical schools, as well as some private medical schools, some of who offer up to $4,000 per year to these preceptors. As a state medical school, we cannot compete with these incentives. The shortage of preceptors has been further compounded by the number of primary care providers who are retiring, and most recently with the COVID pandemic, many doctors are scaling back taking on medical students. The community preceptor tax credit being available to more primary care mentors will greatly offset the shortage of teachers. Seeing the excitement and joy which a clinician has for caring for his or her primary care patients in an underserved area of Maryland will greatly enhance the likelihood that the students will in turn decide to become a primary care clinician, perhaps even choose to practice in the same community where they once trained. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, sir. We next have signed up Theresa Newman. Is Newman
Good
here?
afternoon, Madam Chair, and members of the committee. I am Theresa Newman, a veteran PA for 27 years, legislative director for the Maryland Academy of Physician Assistants, and a PA educator for the past 12 years. I've supplied you with written testimony in favor of House Bill 1195, and which Delegate Adams was very descriptive in, so I won't reiterate anything. As a PA educator, I am well aware of the struggles of finding clinical placement for our students. And the same does apply to medical students and nurse practitioners, as Dr. Colgan has said. We're losing clinical sites to these schools from other states, the Caribbean, and they're paying preceptors as much as $1,200 per student per rotation, either the preceptor or the site. And, since the 1980s, medicine has really been run by businessmen. And what matters is the bottom line dollar-wise. In a world of capitated payments and reduced fees for service, primary care providers tend to be the least compensated of all healthcare specialties, and yet they are the most crucial to well-coordinated and patient-centered care. By updating this legislation and making it more amenable to clinical primary care preceptors in these underserved areas, we're hoping that it will attract students to practice where they trained upon graduation. To my knowledge, none of the Maryland schools are paying preceptors, hence the loss of clinical sites to schools that do. The states of Georgia and Colorado, both with significant rural populations, have successfully implemented similar programs since 2014 in Georgia and since 2016 in Colorado. Preliminary data from Colorado does show an increase in retention of healthcare providers in rural and frontier areas of that state. I was just on a webinar with these folks yesterday, and all of the data is not in, but it's very encouraging. So I ask for your favorable report on House Bill 1195, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
And thank you and Dr. Colgan for joining us today. Are there any questions for either of them? All right, no questions. Thank you both. Thank you, Delegate Adams.
Thank you, committee.
Hearing on House Bill 1195, Delegate Sample Hughes. Madam Speaker Pro Tem, we have House Bill 1252.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of Ways and Means Committee. I'm here today to present House Bill 1252. As you can see and hear, it's similar to the bill that you just heard that Delegate Adams has presented. But what we want to do in particular is just bring about additional awareness of the mere fact that with this pandemic, it has certainly exacerbated the need in quality healthcare professionals, and House Bill 1252, will help these areas that are underserved and lacking healthcare workers to be able to fill those gaps. If you recall, back in 2016, I had a bill that started this process, and the bill was passed to help preceptors be able to get those healthcare workers in those communities, in the trenches, and helping and educating those individuals. This bill here today expands that to go towards physician assistants. We know since 2016 that progress has been made. The data has showed that to date is about 101 individuals has benefited from this tax credit. And so to that end, we want to make sure with this particular that the physician assistants are a part of this particular tax credit. So today I do ask for a favorable report so we can continue to address those shortfalls within our community in the healthcare shortage workforce. Thank you again, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Delegate. I do have a question. And I'm not sure if you're familiar with the prior bill, but I'm not the most knowledgeable person about preceptors. And now we have two very similar preceptor bills. I think they both might be sponsored by the same senator. Do you know?
Yes, that's correct.
What, if anything, is different from these bills? And if you don't know, that's not on you, but I'm just curious.
Well, ironically, I must say it's very the same question that I have asked. But to that point, I want to say Delegate Adams' bill certainly works to repeal termination dates, the dates for just licensed physicians and nurse practitioners, but then brings in, let me back up. Make sure that we're bringing in those physician assistants into the program, as they were not a part of the original ask and the original passage of the bill in 2016. What we have learned through this, yes, we've gotten benefits from it, but what we've learned is that being the workforce is so short that this will put in a population that is out there serving and make them eligible to receive the tax credits. So that's the physician assistant. So that's the difference. We know that we need it, but we also know that there's a difference where they were not included in the original bill in 2016.
All right, thank you. Any other questions for Madam Speaker Pro Tem? Seeing none, we have the same two people testifying. I'll start with Richard Colgan.
Yes, hi, thank you. Okay, I'll just be very brief. I'm in favor for the same tax credit, which currently goes to physicians and nurse practitioners, to include physician assistants. As Ms. Newman mentioned, and as we've heard, the initial bill in 2016 initially was for physicians hosting medical students in their office. The nurse practitioners requested to join that bill, and we had no objection to do so. Unfortunately, because of time constraints, we were not able to get logistics such that the physician assistants also could join in on that initial bill in 2016. So they were clearly deserving and should have been included, but it was kind of a logistical and an organizational challenge at the very last moment there. So allowing the physician assistants to enjoy the same benefits that physicians and nurse practitioners would enjoy on the community preceptor tax credit bill will allow for a greater number of primary care mentors to host students in their office. And I believe in doing so, we'll see a greater number of general practitioners, physicians, nurse practitioners, and physician assistants to choose to work in underserved areas of our state. So I'm very much in favor of House Bill 1195, and thank you so much for your consideration of the request.
Thank you. And Ms. Newman?
Again, good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. I won't reintroduce myself, but I urge that you vote favorably on this bill. I'm really here today to update you on some of the work that has been done since the last legislative session. Over the summer and fall, I have worked with the Maryland Board of Physicians, the nurse practitioners, Dr. DePinto's office, which is the Office of Population Health and Improvement, in the Department of Health, to work through concerns that had been raised during the 2020 session. And so I'm pleased to state that, you know, these issues, to the best of my knowledge, have been resolved. And so most likely it's really not news to anyone that there are shortages of healthcare providers in the state. Maryland, most people aren't aware that there are 4 PA programs now in Maryland, with a 5th one on the horizon. 2 of these programs are located in rural areas of the state, with UMES being in Princess Anne County on the eastern shore, the southern eastern shore, and Frostburg being in western Maryland. And so we really need clinical preceptors in these areas. So again, retaining them after graduation is critically important to being able to increase access to care in these areas. Maryland PAs are actually supportive of a self-imposed licensing fee increase, and this has been discussed and with the Board of Physicians in order to fund this tax credit, in order to make this as budget neutral as possible for the PAs. The U.S. News and World Report recently published their annual top jobs overall in the United States and specifically in healthcare. And the physician assistant profession topped both of those lists. And the tax credit, as Dr. Colin stated, has been in place since 2016 for both the physicians and the nurse practitioners. And so we're asking that it be extended to the PAs as well, especially considering we would be funding this for ourselves. So I'm happy to answer any questions that the committee may have.
Delegate Luke, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And this is for anyone who wants to respond, and it kind of applies to both bills. So, absolutely a good cause, no issues with making sure PAs are eligible. The question that our committee is trying to ask on any tax-related program, because we have, kind of a fiduciary responsibility to the taxpayers to make sure the state's making the right investments with our tax credits and programs like that, is are we getting the bang for the buck? So my question is, has there been any data or any empirical analysis in Maryland or elsewhere that has as of yet this program to be effective in achieving the goals that have been set for it? Or is that a type of analysis that we would need to do over the next few years as we continue to implement it? That's it. That's my question.
I suspect that it's too early to be able to collect data. These students who are being precepted are typically second or third year students. The bill has been, I think it's been either 3 or 4 years now of groups that have been recipients of that tax credit. So as of now, those same students are likely to be either second or third year residents if they're in a primary care residency. Right. But I don't know if there is similar data from Colorado, which is the second state. Actually, Maryland was the second state after Georgia. We saw any data to answer your question, sir.
So can I ask a follow-up, Madam Chair? So the earlier bill, in Delegate Adams' bill, one of the provisions removed the sunset from this program. And I think, what we've been trying to do on tax credit programs is rather than removing sunsets until we have data extending them. So what would be the appropriate timeline for us to be able to say, yes or no, this program has resulted in like, how many more years would we really need to get a good sense of it? Is it 5? Is it 7? What would be kind of the appropriate time period?
Well, Delegate, I'm going to just take that from the perspective of where Dr. Colgan has indicated that that span of time that they have to be with them, and while they're in the second year and third year, and then in the residency part. So I was going to say another 5 years out to ensure that we have a good picture of what has occurred and what the benefit has been to these rural areas and the underserved areas. So.
Okay, that's great. That's very helpful. I appreciate it very much, Madam Speaker Pro Tem.
All right, thank you. Any other questions on this bill? All right, thank you all very much. Thank you for coming in today. We're done with the hearing on House Bill 1252. We'll move to House Bill 1176. Delegate Hartman.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, and fellow members of this Austin Ways and Means Committee. For the record, I am Delegate Wayne Hartman here with House Bill 1176. It is an income tax credit for travel, hospitality, and entertainment expenses. This allows an individual to claim a credit against the state income tax for certain travel, hospitality, and entertainment expenses. Wonder what those expenses would be. That could include food and beverage expenses, lodging expenses, other than expenses related to lodging at a vacation home that is owned by the individual, unfortunately. Transportation expenses, provided that the credit for miles driven in the individual's privately owned car is the same as the rate for privately owned vehicles for state employees. It also include expenses for live entertainment and sporting events, expenses related to attending a conference or a business meeting, and the travel must occur between December 31st, 2020 and be before January 1st, 2023. Now, the final destination, the trip must be at least 50 miles from your home. This bill, I have to give credit to my good friend Delegate Beitzel from Garrett County. This bill is something that it's not an Ocean City bill. It's not a Garrett County bill. We were so serious about getting this bill passed. We've already amended the bill from the original amounts that were outlined. Originally, it was based off of a federal program, and we have amended the amounts down considerably in an effort to make this more palatable for the committee. An individual would have a credit up to $500 from those expenses. A couple or an individual with dependents would be able to claim up to $1,000 in tax credit. We've eliminated the additional $500 for the additional dependents, and we've also amended the fiscal note or the cap of this credit from 25 million to 5 million. So again, this is a cooperative effort across the state. It's to help the hospitality industry, which I think we would all agree is the hardest hit industry. This encourages Maryland residents to travel in Maryland. This will help every part of the state. It would encourage folks to travel, to Baltimore City, maybe to see a sporting event or a museum or something of that. It may encourage a trip to, I'm getting lost here, a trip to St. Michael's, maybe to St. Mary's County. I'm trying to create the envision that everyone's going to benefit. This is not just for one particular tourist area. It could encourage travel to the mountains of Western Maryland, to the beaches of the Eastern Shore. So as you can envision, this will keep money in Maryland and save countless jobs. Now, one flaw I do want to point out is the fact that the fiscal note shows the expense of the tax credit. It does not take into consideration the effect of the jobs it's going to save, the multiplier effect of all the other additional money that would be spent, and all the other money coming back to the state as a result of this. So we're very serious about getting this passed. One of the things I've heard today, the most important thing we're doing up here as delegates is getting that second shot in our arm. And I have to make the analogy, this particular bill is that second shot in the arm for our businesses. They greatly need this. So I know there's several people signed up to testify, and I'll leave you with that. Are we frozen or?
Hartman broke the Zoom.
No, I think we're just waiting for Madam Chair.
What did you do, Hartman?
I think everyone is just so floored by the impact of this bill.
Yes.
That I think I've left everyone speechless.
We're in stunned silence.
Stunned silence.
Amazement.
Delegate Hartman, who's your next speaker that you have?
I believe Susan Jones would be there.
All right, let's start with Susan Jones. Ms. Jones.
Hi, thank you, members of the Ways and Means Committee. I'm Susan Jones. I am a lifelong Maryland resident, and I've served as the executive director of the Ocean City Hotel, Motel, and Restaurant Association since 1995. I am also on the Maryland Tourism Coalition, where I've served that long as well. I'm joining you on behalf of our 400 lodging, dining, attraction, and allied members in Ocean City in support of this bill. As Delegate Hartman mentioned, leisure and hospitality has been the hardest hit. And since the pandemic, our industry accounts for 39% of the total jobs lost in the USA. We have been working diligently as a tourism community to really help our businesses, and they most likely will survive somehow by a thread, not all of them. But we think this bill can push us to that top of the hill. We can get to the full recovery with this bill. And I ask you to think about the bill like this. This is a bill that was designed by Marylanders. It is for Marylanders. It is a way for Maryland employers, for all of us to keep it local. It is a made in Maryland project. Recently, you probably all saw the comptroller speak to the fact that 2/3 of our Maryland residents were doing okay. They're weathering the storm. And yes, they are. So we know through the pent-up demand for travel and all the saved disposable income, people are going to vacation. We want to capture that money. We want to capture those dollars of Marylanders who are planning to travel. We can do that by giving them an incentive to travel in their own state, rather than spending their money in Virginia, Delaware, Utah, wherever. This tax credit is available to all of your constituents. It is something that can truly stimulate the economy. Tourism is an economic engine. It is going to provide a return to the state and to municipalities in the way of room tax, admission tax, amusement tax, sales tax, alcohol tax. It will bring back tax revenues. In a normal year, Maryland's tourism industry provides more than 150,000 full-time jobs. We have to make sure that we can keep people employed in the hospitality industry. So we are trying to spur travel around our state. Exploring our state, it's an effective way to ignite the economy, and it can provide prosperity and give us that extra push. Interestingly enough, U.S. Travel is encouraging Congress to do this very same thing. They are suggesting temporary tax incentives for leisure and business travel because it will boost demand. It will accelerate rehiring. We know it's a good idea. So I implore you to say yes to this Made in Maryland project and offer an income tax credit for travel in our state. And I thank you very much for your time.
No, thank you. And thank you for your patience, everyone. Our next we'll have Nicole Christian, excuse me.
Thank you, Delegate Washington and committee members. I'm Nicole Christian, President and CEO of the Garrett County Chamber of Commerce, and I'm here on behalf of our 600 members in support of House Bill 1176. Maryland's tourism industry, as you know, has been severely battered by the pandemic. This is the 11th largest industry in the state, and it is imperative to our economic recovery that we enlist all means necessary to support tourism. In Garrett County, tourism accounts annually for $315 million in visitor spending, has a total economic impact of $360 million, and supports more than 3,000 jobs. For this reason, the Chamber reached out to Delegate Hartman to introduce this bill to incentivize travel in Maryland that will actually inject money back into some of the most vulnerable businesses in the state and help retain the jobs in this industry that are in jeopardy. 1176, as you know, provides a state income tax credit to Marylanders who travel within the state and spend money on hospitality-related purchases. Delegate Hartman described those purchases: food and beverage, lodging, transportation, tickets, live entertainment, expenses related to attending a conference or meeting. Again, I just want to point out, though, it's an income tax credit, so people can only receive the credit if they expend the money. Therefore, the tax credit is actually offset by the money being put back into the economy, which is so desperately needed, especially for these businesses that have been hurt so badly by the pandemic. And then in turn, the expenditures generate additional tax revenues in the form of sales tax, accommodations tax, emissions and amusement tax. We, have reviewed the fiscal note and very happy to support the amendments to this bill that would reduce the cap from 25 million to 5 million. But even when you look at that, the note doesn't take into account the revenue that is generated from these other taxes due to the multiplier effect. And again, the bill has broad applicability for all tourism businesses, and it keeps those dollars in state. We know there's going to be pent-up demand for travel. Let's encourage Marylanders to travel within their own state. So we respectfully request a favorable report for 1176. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, we'll have Adam R. City of Harpeth Grace.
Yes, sir. Madam Chair and the distinguished members of the Ways and Means Committee, I am Adam Rubchinsky, for the record, representing the City of Harpeth Grace in support of House Bill 1176. The city of Havre de Grace is a historic waterfront community and tourism destination located in Harford County, Maryland. The current city administration has made significant strategic investments in the areas of economic development and tourism. This includes attracting new businesses and entertainment venues, which normally attract visitors from across our state. Throughout the pandemic, the city has been committed to business-friendly policies that provide assistance and relax many regulations, while also maintaining and encouraging safety protocols that prevent the spread of COVID-19. Unfortunately, however, like so many local economies across Maryland, our business community, including its tourism sector, has been devastated by the dual COVID-19 health emergency and the concurrent financial crisis. Our tourism industry is a vital component of the city's economic recovery, with Harford County being located in a 50-plus mile radius of major population centers throughout Maryland. The city supports House Bill 1176 because it believes that if passed, it would create a significant amount of economic stimulus for our local economy. We urge a favorable report for House Bill 1176. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we have Stephen Green.
Hello, honorable members of the Ways and Means Committee. My name is Steve Green. I'm the owner of High Mountain Sports. We have a ski bike shop here in Garrett County. I was also a member of the Maryland Outdoor Recreation Economic Commission. So we're in beautiful Deep Creek Lake located in Garrett County, where we've had 109 inches of snow this year. And I can personally attest that the skiing this morning was awesome. I also want to note that I was recently saddened by the passing of Delegate Hank Heller, a former member of this committee. I spent a lot of my childhood growing up in his living room before I moved out here to beautiful Western Maryland. At first glance, this looks like a money grab to help the rich. The reality is that this could not be further from the truth. Let's focus the money from those who have the available funds to travel to help hard-hit businesses and put people who work in these industries back to work. The tourism hospitality industry in Maryland and the world has been battered by the pandemic. According to the U.S. Travel Association, travel is down almost $500 billion in the U.S., resulting in $64 billion in missed federal, state, and local tax revenues since the beginning of March. Of all jobs lost nationwide, 39% are in the leisure and hospitality industry. Personally, I know that the wedding industry is one of the hardest hit groups who I think could really benefit from this. If you're about to pay for a wedding out of state, you might be inclined to stay in state if you could get a tax credit. Personally, well, actually, I don't know. I assume the parts of Baltimore tourism industry in the Inner Harbor are really bad. I could just imagine myself saying I'm 50 miles from the Inner Harbor. I could go down to Pickles Pub, grab a beer, have a meal, and then go see the Orioles win a game. So that would be a great way for me to go forward. There's been a lot of short-term relief for this industry, but there's been a little long-term planning to look forward to help rebuild this industry. This is a long-term solution to help rebuild. Will there be pent-up demand for travel? Yes. And unfortunately, I think they're going to go on the plane and spend their money out of state unless they're given a reason to spend their money in Maryland. I believe the state of Maryland will get a lot of bang for its buck here. Please pass this bill so that we can be forward-thinking about the future of this industry.
Thank you so much. And we lastly have Lachelle Scarlato.
Good afternoon, everyone. Honorable Chair, members of the delegation, and committee members. Thank you for the opportunity to provide testimony. I am Lachelle Scarlato, the Executive Director of the Greater Ocean City Chamber of Commerce. The Chamber of Commerce that was founded in 1953 and today represents over 800 businesses within Ocean City and the lower eastern shore of Maryland. A chamber that has worked tirelessly to build and develop a strong foundation, serving as an advocate and voice for the business community we represent. The hospitality industry serves in many ways as the foundation for and cross-reaching industry that on the lower eastern shore of Maryland supports so many other industries. Without a strong and vibrant hospitality industry on the lower shore, we are not able to support the ancillary providers. I will not belabor the stories of 2020 that so many of you are already familiar with in personal experience. The stories will indeed be told for many years to come. Today, my hope is that you will see tremendous value in providing an opportunity for both the hospitality industry and the visitor consumer in Maryland to gain mutual benefit with your favorable report for HB 1176, allowing an individual to claim a credit against the state income tax for certain travel, hospitality, and entertainment expenses paid or incurred by the individual during taxable years 2021 and 22 under certain circumstances. We, as the Greater Ocean City Chamber of Commerce, recognize that compromise may indeed need to be accommodated in what terms are extended in the final legislation, and we support such. What we ask of you is that you take full consideration of the impact that 2020 has had on our hospitality partners and leverage legislation that would be able to provide some form of support for those that have been so significantly impacted. We would welcome any of you to visit the Lower Shore and Ocean City this summer. Your visit would help to provide the needed investment in our business community after a challenging 2020. We remain grateful for your vigilance and ask for your support with a favorable report for HB 1176. Sending my best to all of you in kindness from Ocean City. Hello, my Havity Grace friends, and thank you all for your time.
Thank you very much. Any questions for any of the 5 people who spoke up on this bill? All right, thank you. Seeing no, Delegate Lasanti.
I just had one question, and if I can, I'm probably going to direct this to Ms. Scarlato, because I know she has a lot of experience in the industry. It just seems to me that in addition to the value to the industry, it seems to me that there's a lot of spin-off value to cross-marketing this tax credit and cross-marketing our communities throughout the state if this bill should pass. I mean, I'm thinking about, being able to highlight the wonderful aspects of so much of our state that people don't really get to see. And maybe you could, I know you have some background in that.
I agree entirely. I couldn't agree more. And specific to the shore here, I can speak, many of you are familiar. It doesn't take very long for us to indeed exceed that 50-mile radius here on the shore. A visit to some of our ancillary lower shore communities and supporting them in their efforts and their cause, and very similar to you, Delegate Lasanti, and where Havity Grace is located and in proximity to really do exactly as you mentioned, cross-market some of these communities, the amenities that they offer within driving distance here in Maryland, that we believe today's consumer is all the more anxious to participate in with the current climate and what we're experiencing as a whole. And that Maryland, in and of itself, we call it, America the miniature, could offer so many of those opportunities for that cross-marketing. We certainly support our friends in Garrett County that are on here as well, Nicole and some of those, and have had conversations at length, very much related to what you just shared.
All right, thank you both very much. Any further questions? All right, thank you all. We're done with the hearing on House Bill 1176. Delegate Lutke, House Bill 1200.
Thank you, Madam Chair. House Bill 1200 has to do with an issue we've already discussed this session, earlier in session, in overriding the governor's veto of legislation implementing a gross revenues tax on digital advertising revenue for large digital advertisers. Essentially, what this bill is a corrective bill, just tweaking a couple provisions that we needed to fix in the original language. First of all, to clarify that the bill is not intended to impact the news media. There's significant precedent for that. We have a number of exemptions in our tax code in order to support the news media in their mission, which is absolutely vital to democracy. And then also a provision clarifying that a person who derives gross revenues from digital advertising services in the state cannot directly pass on the cost of the tax imposed to a customer who purchases the digital advertising services by means of a separate fee, surcharge, or line item. And so these two provisions, obviously, along with the underlying tax provision, will likely be debated in the courts. But should the courts affirm the law passed in Maryland, and should Maryland start implementing this form of taxation, we believed it was important to make sure these provisions were in place. And I would urge the committee to give the bill a favorable report.
Any questions? Delegate Buckle.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just had, maybe two questions, maybe three, depending on follow-up. One is specifically about the mechanism by which we think that we will prevent these companies from passing on the additional costs, the additional taxes to the end user, who is our taxpayer or our job creator, our local business. And if I get this correctly, Delegate Lukey, it says may not directly pass on the cost. We all have cell phone bills. I never look at my own cell phone bill, but the few times that I have, they have little surcharges or specified fee lines that say, hey, I'm adding $1.19 to your bill because of whatever. This bill says they wouldn't be able to do that, correct?
That is correct.
But there's nothing in the bill, and there's nothing at least that I'm aware of that we could do legally to stop these advertising companies, entities, whatever they are, from simply raising the costs of providing their services to Maryland purchasers in recognition of the tax. So cosmetically, the bill would say you can't list that. You can't say, hey, I'm charging you $100 for this service, but I have to pay, let's say, $250 as a tax. So I'm going to charge you $102.50 with a surcharge line. But there's nothing we can do to stop them from changing the price structure in general for Maryland because they perceive it as a higher cost state for them to do business in.
I think, a business can change their cost structure at any time, or their fee structure at any time. I think they'll have to respond to market forces in that case. I mean, I think you probably have a difference of opinion with me on what I'm about to say, but I don't believe that the companies will pass through in the first place. I think a lot of that conversation, frankly, was fear mongering, as I said on the floor, from those companies. So, I'm comfortable with this provision.
Okay, well, we will have a difference of opinion about that, just which we get along so well. We respect each other, and that's fine.
Yeah.
But in my experience, at least, very large and very sophisticated companies know how to do business, and they figure out where they can make money and where they can't make money, and whether the juice is worth the squeeze to them. So, I think they'll find a way to do that. My second area of questioning is the structure of the bill, the provisions of the bill that exempt media entities, essentially. And my understanding of the bill was, in its original form, as we've debated it several times now for a session or two, was that it was really designed to apply to these very, very large corporations, the Googles, the Facebooks, the things of that, like that nature of the world.
That's correct.
And so the bill has, at a very first level to kick in for taxation, is you have to have global annual gross revenues of at least $100 million. Am I reading that correctly?
That's correct.
Okay. And so all of these organizations that have sent us in letters of support, which I really appreciate. I'm all for, small businesses and helping these local newspapers, a local radio station. Is there any reason to believe that any of our local small town radio stations, television stations, hometown newspapers have global annual gross revenues of more than $100 million? Or would this mainly just help sort of the Washington Post and the Baltimore Sun?
I think that question might be best put to a witness who's here from the Press Association. I'll just say, okay, in my opinion, with this language, it's abundantly clear that our in-state media will not be impacted.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, delegates. Any other questions for Delegate Lutke? All right, next call on Timothy Nelson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to testify today regarding House Bill 1200. My name is Tim Nelson, and I serve as counsel to the Maryland, D.C. Delaware Broadcasters Association. The association and its members, approximately 35 TV stations and 175 radio stations, enthusiastically support House Bill 1200 and hope the committee will report it favorably. As Delegate Lutke just mentioned, Maryland's broadcasters and other news media entities like newspapers were never the intended targets of House Bill 732's digital advertising tax legislation. Despite that attention, many broadcasters would in fact be directly subject to the digital ad tax as it's written. We thank Delegate Lutke for sponsoring House Bill 1200 and recognizing this unintended consequence. The bill remedies that by exempting from the ad tax those advertisements that appear on digital interfaces, websites, apps, and the like that are owned or operated by a broadcast entity or a news media entity. And in so doing, we believe that the bill recognizes the importance and value of objective, accurate, trusted local journalism here in Maryland, and the critical need for that journalism, perhaps now more than ever, as people are turning in record numbers to their local media outlets for critical information during what I'll call a double whammy that we're experiencing between the coronavirus pandemic that is happening during an economic downturn. In addition to providing news and weather and health and emergency information, both on air and online, our stations air countless hours of free public service announcements. They participate in and sponsor events like food drives and telethons that lift up and help the very communities in which their employees live and work. And that's all happening at a time that local broadcasters and newspapers are facing significant competitive and financial challenges. Producing high quality local news costs a lot of money. Local TV and radio stations provide their over-the-air services free to the public. We aren't a subscription service. They fund their on-air and digital operations through advertising. Advertising is essentially the only source of revenue for radio. It's the primary source of revenue for local TV stations. But stations' ad revenues have been declining sharply for years. And as you might imagine, that's in large part because of the dominance of a handful of giant digital platforms in the ad marketplace, the big tech companies. Advertisers and their critical revenues are being diverted away from broadcasters and traditional news media, the very entities that produce the important local journalism. We believe that subjecting broadcasters to the digital ad tax would ultimately lead to less of that local journalism on which the public depends and we believe the public needs. House Bill 1200 aims to prevent that. It's corrective, as Delegate Lutke said, and our association thanks you for your consideration of the bill, hopes you'll report it favorably, and I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we also have Rebecca Snyder.
Good afternoon, committee. I am Rebecca Snyder, the Executive Director of the Maryland, Delaware, DC Press Association. And House Bill 1200 obviously addresses problems that were inherent in House Bill 732, the digital ad tax, does it by exempting news media, which includes newspapers, news websites, and broadcasters. And so really this exemption acknowledges the vital importance of Maryland's local news outlets in providing news and commentary, and Tim touched upon that. So we really appreciate Delegate Lutke's support and recognition of the importance of local news gathering, and for understanding the role that digital advertising revenue plays in supporting that news reporting. So our members connect the communities that they serve by reporting on issues of public interest, supporting public service programs, and by advertising. So Tim spoke about the critical work that our members do and the tough economic times that honestly we're all facing across the state, but especially for news media. I want to focus my remarks on the belief and fact in my mind that news media and broadcast entities should be exempted from this tax. The language of this bill is very tailored, it's narrow, it focuses on entities that are engaged primarily in the business of news gathering, reporting, or publishing in the public interest. It further clarifies that aggregators and republishers of third-party content don't qualify for this exemption, so it's super narrow. Now, the freedom of the press is specifically called out in the Constitution in the First Amendment, and in the words of Supreme Court Justice Potter Stewart, freedom of the press is no constitutional accident, but an acknowledgement of the critical role played by the press in American society. The Constitution requires sensitivity to that role and to the special needs of the press in performing it effectively. So Maryland has also further recognized the unique role of the press by passing laws that facilitate text journalism. Many other states do this as well. But for instance, Maryland has one of the oldest shield laws on record, which protects journalists from disclosing sources. These protections are important. This digital advertising tax exemption is part of that strong tradition, and we urge a favorable report. Thank you very much for your consideration.
Thank you. Thank you both.
While we're,
Yes, go ahead.
do you want me to address Delegate Buckles' question regarding, since we have a couple seconds left, or
Sure,
shall we
please.
ask it again?
Please.
Okay, so the aggregation of news media is pretty apparent. So like the Cumberland Times News, which is going to represent the delegates district in terms of its newspaper coverage, is part of a large national chain. Nobody opens their books to me, and let's be honest, my members don't come and say, oh, this is our revenue. But even the smallest publications are often part of larger entities that will be tagged by this. So if you think about Western Maryland, the Hagerstown Herald Mail is part of Gannett Media, which is one of the largest companies, totally would be tagged by this. All of those larger companies are made up of small individual local publications, each of them scrapping to survive, each of them needing news support and news coverage to serve their local communities. So this ad tax really would hit a lot wider than one would expect, and that's one of the main reasons we need this exemption. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Thank you for answering that question. Any other questions for Ms. Snyder or Mr. Nelson? All right. Thank you. Seeing none, we will next go to, we're done with the hearing on House Bill 1200. To members, this is now our last bill of the day, House Bill 1211. Delegate Barnes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Being that this is the last bill of the day, I will be quick. House Bill 1211 invests and provides executive support to Maryland-based technology companies run by entrepreneurs who demonstrate economic disadvantages. The main purpose is to support the development of startup companies run by entrepreneurs from disadvantaged backgrounds who have historically lacked access to traditional forms of capital and executive network at the pre-seed stage. The impact of COVID-19 pandemic in our state economy has complex budget challenges. Despite these challenges, we should not be stagnant from taking action. It is well known that the startups ecosystems are the key to growing a vibrant state economy. It would promote clusters of talent and drive job creation, new business formation, and attract investment capital across the state of Maryland. But we must ensure our economically disadvantaged tech entrepreneurs are not overlooked in the process. House Bill 1211 is necessary to support and enable Maryland-based technologies companies run by entrepreneurs who demonstrate economic disadvantages the resources to mobilize their companies for the greater good of all Marylanders. For all those reasons, I urge a favorable report on 1211.
Thank you, Delegate. Any questions for Delegate Barnes? All right. Thank you, Delegate Barnes. 5 witnesses. I'll call the first one. The head of TEDCO, Troy LaMail-Stovall.
Delegate, good seeing you again. I think I probably should move in. You know, if we were in Annapolis, I think I've testified enough with you guys. So always appreciate the time before the committee. Delegate Barnes, thank you. Appreciate your continued commitment to this very important topic. Again, Chair Kaiser, Vice Chair Washington, members of the House Ways and Means Committee. My name is Troy LaMail-Stovall, and in my role as the CEO and Executive Director of the Maryland Technology Development Corporation, better known as TEDCO, I humbly am able to lead 30 dedicated TEDCO professionals in efforts to promote economic growth through the fostering of an inclusive entrepreneurial innovation ecosystem. TEDCO discovers, invests in, and helps build great Maryland-based technology companies. TEDCO has an obligation, both economic and moral, to create a more equitable entrepreneurial economy by providing investment opportunities and advisory services for wealth inclusion and expansion. And to expand that wealth, we must tap into the creative and ingenuity of Maryland's diverse population and its entrepreneurial ecosystem. It is well documented that early stage ventures founded by individuals from socially and economically disadvantaged groups lack access to funding, as Delegate Barnes pointed out. As a specific example, a 2017 PitchBook study reveals that of the $40 billion in venture funds raised that particular year, less than 3% was used to fund entities started by socially and economically disadvantaged individuals. And allow me to be just a little personal for a moment, because some time ago, as a young Black aspiring entrepreneur, I became fully aware of the challenges associated with accessing capital for a startup enterprise. I became fully cognizant of the lack of capital amongst families and friends and family. And I know personally why we not only have to have a builder fund, but why it must be enlarged, especially as COVID has exacerbated the aforementioned funding gap, And speaking of the builder fund, which was established in 2018, that was designed to provide pre-seed funding and advisory services to very early stage technology companies, as pointed out by Delegate Barnes, founded by economically and socially disadvantaged entrepreneurs. The Builder Fund invests with the goal of helping companies reach meaningful milestones and becoming attractive investments to larger institutional investors. Since its inception and with limited funding, TechCo has invested in 17 companies and provide over 3,000 hours of executive coaching and peer-to-peer collaboration. This includes companies like JuneBrain of Montgomery County, which is developing a wearable headset to help neurologists remotely track multiple sclerosis flare-ups. Emergency Medical Innovation of Howard County, which is developing a patented nosebleed treatment device. ClearMask of Baltimore City, which produces and sells FDA-approved, fully transparent medical face masks. And IPGen of Prince George's County, which is developing a patented software service which predicts whether a claim will be allowed by an examiner. I believe later on you'll hear from JuneBrain, which is led by a Black woman, and IPGen, will be with us today. But of those 17 companies, 6 of those companies have gone on to raise over $7 million in seed and venture capital. House Bill 1211 would give TechCo the incremental resources necessary to expand the successful program. The demand for funding for Builder Fund far exceeds current funding levels. For example,
Mr. Lamel-Stovall, your time has passed.
I apologize. Thank you, and encourage a favorable report on House Bill 1211.
Thank you so much. James Brinkley? James Brinkley here?
Yes, I'm here. I'm present. Thank you to the committee for allowing me to testify for House Bill 1211. I want to be a little personal, with my testimony. As you said, my name is James Brinkley, and I'm the founder and CEO of IPGen, where we're building tools to streamline and automate the patent processes using AI and natural language generation. I was a previous IP attorney for a number of years, and it was kind of hard, going into the entrepreneur world. When I first went over, I thought that I had everything under control, and I learned quickly that, there's a lot of things that I didn't know. For one, raising capital, that it would be extremely difficult, in the times that we're in. Organizations like TechCo and the Builder Fund have been extremely helpful to us right now. We weren't able to raise the typical friends and family round because of, right now, where I come from, my friends and my family don't have the capital to just, throw into a company. So I had to bootstrap myself, use my savings and all that. And having a young family, that's been difficult. So I really appreciate all the help that TechCo and the Builder Fund has done, especially Tim Wilson, who's heading the Builder Fund right now. He's very entrepreneur friendly. He makes sure that we have what we need, the executive support, the capital. I don't think we would be here today without the help of TechCo and the Builder Fund. And so I hope that you give favorable recognition to House Bill 1211. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We next have Samantha Scott.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for this opportunity to provide testimony in favor of the Builder Fund.
I'm Dr. Samantha Scott. I have a PhD in biomedical engineering with a focus in ophthalmology and neurology. I'm also a neurology patient, and many of the challenges I face as a patient are what inspired me to start my company. So June Brain is located in Rockville, Maryland. We're developing a retinal imaging telehealth solution that helps clinicians monitor disease progression in patients with retinal and neurological disease much more frequently and remotely. So our goal is to expand access to this type of advanced imaging technology and ultimately improve patients' quality of life. So last year we participated in TEDCO's Builder Fund cohort, and it was an awesome experience. His team creates a supportive environment that helped us overcome a lot of the business challenges we faced as a result of COVID. In addition to funding, I think the greatest value added by the Builder Fund was boosting our team with very hands-on and experienced individuals. So I was specifically teamed with 3 advisors with expertise in insurance reimbursement, the FDA approval process, product development, and fundraising. And I continue to work with 2 of those advisors today. But essentially, this provided us access to resources that allowed us to use our funding in a very cost-effective and efficient way. And this is critical for underrepresented founders who, again, often have a difficult time fundraising to the same extent as our peers. And that's something that I've certainly faced. But again, overall, the Builder Fund was a very valuable program. The team continues to work with the cohort today, so they're making sure we have access to resources as our company continues to grow. So thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. We'll take questions and then I'll take the next 2 people for some more questions. We'll start with Delegate Palakovich-Carr.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And first of all, thank you, Delegate Barnes, for this bill. I really like the idea. If perhaps our TEDCO witness could answer a couple of questions for me. So I know TEDCO right now has a seed fund. So are you envisioning that this program would be for earlier stage or companies that haven't raised as much money, have less employees, and then ultimately would be feeding into the Builder Fund? Or is this just kind of an alternate to that existing program?
No, thank you for the question, Delegate. No, so we, as you know, we already have the Builder Fund, as Dr. Scott and Mr. Brinkley pointed out, and so it is for pre-seed. It is actually a pre-seed fund as it's set up right now. So we're not looking for any changes to the timing of when the funds would happen, just an increase in the funding for it. So to answer your question more directly, it would still, this actually feeds, it's the other way around. We're trying to move them, hopefully June Brain and IPGN will make their way into our seed and even our MVF funds. And that's the progression we'd like to see them going in all of our investments.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. And sorry if I missed that.
Oh, absolutely, no question.
And one other question. So the legislation says that it would be for entrepreneurs from socially or economically disadvantaged backgrounds. Would that be like questions that would be asked on the applications? How would TEDCO actually administer that and decide who would be eligible?
Yeah, we do that now. And so it's looking at, obviously, the simple one is obviously for women and people of color are the easy ones, but the other ones that we actually do fund are from the rural areas as well. And so it's trying to look at where someone hasn't had access to the traditional capitals or advisory types of things. So it's not a hard and it's not a hard and fast rule. We try to take some time to understand the company, understand the founders and where they came from to get to ascertain that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Question, Delegate Buckle?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And that kind of related somewhat to my questions for Mr. Lemamsto, the Director of TEDCO, that the fund, I think this is a great bill. I think it's a wonderful idea to try to identify groups from across the state, urban communities, rural communities. That you kind of hit on my question, that you really reach out to folks from a socially disadvantaged or economically disadvantaged perspective and give them that initial capital. And I think this bill is very effective at trying to achieve that. And, we have the bill in through our task force to try to create a similar type of concept in a little bit different way, specifically geared toward the 3 Western counties. I hope they both can advance together. Is there something from the TEDCO perspective, I think you just hit on it, is really all we're doing here is just we're formalizing this program. Is that fair? I mean, you have a program, but it is not legislatively codified as a program. And then you want to make sure that you have sufficient capital to really fund it to get the most bang for the buck. Is that?
Yes, to answer both of the questions, if I may, just going back to the, and I
Sure.
appreciate, yeah, it's absolutely, this is the complement to the conversation we had yesterday about the bill for Western Maryland. So this provides those resources for, if, looking at that pilot that we're trying to do for Western Maryland, this will give us additional resources to do that as well.
Yeah, and I want to see it work throughout the state. I know there's a lot of well-deserving businesses and these folks that have come in and testified. I hope they take off. So I appreciate the bill. Thank you very much. And I hope we can make something happen on this front. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate Buckle. We now have 2 more people testifying. We'll start with Wes Moore.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good afternoon, Delegate Barnes, and also the members of the Ways and Means Committee. I appreciate the opportunity to testify in support of Bill HB 1211. My support comes from the fact that this bill is going to ensure that entrepreneurs who have been generally historically denied early stage capital will now have access to traditional forms of capital throughout the capital stack, and also the management assistance that is necessary and required oftentimes in the pre-stage elements of business creation. And the data about the disparities around funding is glaring. An analysis by Reuters found that in the past 6 years, the percentage of venture capital that go to Black entrepreneurs alone has not risen above 5%. And last year, as was pointed out earlier, of the $148 billion of venture capital, 3% went to Black founded companies. And so access to venture capital is critical because it is often the lifeline of many of the startups. It's not just the first bit of capital, but it's the first sign of belief that it's the first sign of belief, not only the business, but the entrepreneur. And as someone who has started an early stage platform in Maryland that has had a successful exit, it was early stage capital that provided the fuel for not just my operational success, but the belief in the proof of concept and also the belief in your aspirations. And so the idea that this is not just about righting a wrong, but it is about, or any well-documented historical imbalances, it is a business imperative. With access to capital, entrepreneurs from socioeconomic disadvantaged backgrounds can grow their businesses, they hire employees, they grow revenues. And access to capital spurs capital growth. But with financial capital, oftentimes a prerequisite of financial capital is social capital, which oftentimes is lacking in many communities in urban and rural and suburban areas throughout the state. And so finally, this bill, it matters because the return on investment that we'll have for this bill is going to be high. According to the Multicultural Economy Report by the University of Georgia, the combined buying power of African Americans, Asian Americans, Native Americans stands at around $2.7 trillion. And so these increases in buying power is a result of the surge of minority-owned businesses. We know that a robust and strong entrepreneurial sector is the engine for a thriving economy. So by all accounts, this bill will be a boon to our larger state economy, and in particular to the segments of the economy that have been most impacted by the economic ravaging of COVID-19. So I stand in proud support of HB 1211 and hope that you will vote in the affirmative. And I thank you for your time.
Thank you. We next have, Terry Speigner. Apologize if I'm mispronouncing your name.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Ways and Means Committee. This is Terry Speigner. I'm the president and CEO of Engine. We are a Maryland-based company headquartered in Prince George's County, considered one of the top 500 managed IT companies in North America, and one of the top 250 tech elite companies in North America. This gray hair came from the 29 years of being in business and doing it in such a way where we did not have that pre-seed capital. We didn't have the access to capital that would have made the journey a lot easier. I had to use the equity in my home. I had to borrow money in order to get our company to the point where it is now considered one of the top 500 IT companies in North America. Everyone doesn't have the ability to do what we did, and access to capital is truly an impediment in the minority community in being able to bootstrap and start a business, and to get that business to the point where it you can then begin to focus on working on your business versus working in your business. I applaud Delegate Barnes and the House of Delegates for putting this bill out there, and hopefully you will pass this bill favorably. This is sorely needed. It's sorely needed for entrepreneurs who have a great idea, entrepreneurs who can add value to the economy, entrepreneurs who can hire people in their communities, entrepreneurs who are looking to start a business, grow a business, and be successful in Maryland. And again, I ask you for a favorable vote on House Bill 1211. Thank you.
Thank you both very much. Anyone have any questions for Mr. Moore or Mr. Speigner? I want to thank all five who testified on Delegate Barnes's bill. Thank you, Delegate Barnes. To members, that's it for today. We're done with our hearing. We're obviously on the floor at 4 o'clock, but we are next meeting as a committee Monday at 4 to vote, and that list is already out online and probably delivered to your office as well. Any announcements from subcommittee chairs?
Yes, thank you, Madam.
Mr. Vice Chair first.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thanks, Madam Chair. The Education Subcommittee is going to meet on Tuesday and Wednesday of next week. You should receive a time, both of those times will be an hour. So let's just say 12 o'clock for now. That will meet on Tuesday and Wednesday.
All right, thank you. Delegate Lutke.
Thanks, Madam Chair. This is more of a point of personal privilege, but I kind of want to shout out again the Women of Ways and Means. We had 3 really spectacular floor leaders on 3 really difficult floor defenses this week, and I thought all 3 of them did an amazing job.
Absolutely. Yes.
I expect nothing less from Ways and Means, man.
That's right. I got a few texts from people talking about how great all of you were doing. Delegate Barnes, any?
Local revenues will probably meet on Thursday.
All right, Delegate Patterson.
Thank you. There will be a work group on Monday, March 1st, 3 p.m. For gaming and racing and gaming work group.
Delegate Wilkins.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Election law does not have plans to meet at this time, but I do want to shout out Delegate Ebersol for over preparing and then having no action.
Man, it's the worst feeling. I know. Delegate Ebersol.
Well, I was going to announce a meeting at 12:30 on Tuesday, but I believe that the Education Subcommittee Chair has stepped in there. I will talk with him about how long he expects his meetings to go and perhaps schedule it at a different time on Tuesday. Maybe Monday, we'll see. We're supposed to get 48 hours business hours, but I'll let you know.
Okay.
Way to go, Mr. Vice Chair.
Anybody else good? Any other announcements for the good order? All right, everyone. Take care. I tried a new timer name today. It's 5 o'clock somewhere.
Madam Chair, if you don't mind,